Welcome everyone. In this video, I'm going to analyze AMD and I'm going to focus on the second quarter results. I'm going to go through the presentation, through some of the points in the earnings call. We're going to see the upside, the downside. We're going to look at the latest data center products. I'm going to do a quick analysis in terms of, looking at fundamentals. Valuation, I don't know. I look at valuation as well, but I don't know, valuation doesn't matter for these stocks because they have a very strong narrative. So yes, they are overvalued, there's no doubt. But the mean reversion, back to the historical average for valuation, it doesn't apply to these stocks. It's not a value stock. So why do you look at valuation anyways? And when you look at the chart, this looks bad. I have to say, there was a trend, higher highs, higher lows, and that trend was pretty much broken, at the middle end of August. And on Friday, we had a decline of 7%, almost 6.5%. Of course, this was mainly due to Broadcom. They signed a huge deal with OpenAI for its XPU. That was a 10 billion deal. I did a video on that, by the way, if you want to have a look at. And this doesn't look good because it's a breakout below what seems to be a support. I don't know. Call me crazy. I don't follow technical analysis that much, but this is not attractive. Okay, so when you have lower lows, the bull run is almost coming to an end. So now the next stop is in the 150s. All right, so approximately this level, we have the next support. I believe that the narrative is strong enough for the stock to consolidate around this level. Okay, we're going to look at the upside. And I think there is enough upside ahead for the stock to rally. However, there are some risks that I'm going to discuss. So let's start with, I like to start with the upside, I like to start with the narrative and see what are the things that have been going on in the second quarter. So when we look at CPU, server CPU, we have data center revenue up by 14% year over year. That's great, double-digit increase. Records for cloud and enterprise CPU sales, and that was the 33rd straight year-over-year share gain quarter. All right, perfect. So that's the CPU, and of course they're gaining share to Intel. I think I'm not sure if I'm able to pull up the charts. Intel versus AMD server CPU market share. Data center. If I'm not able to find the charts very quickly, maybe this one. Yeah, this one tells you the story. You see AMD, of course, this is the expectation, right? So this is the analyst consensus for 2025, 26, 27. And you can see that AMD is starting to steal market share from Intel. And here is the global server shipments. All right, so I think this is not only for data centers. I think this also includes consumer CPUs, right? Anyways, what matters is that the trend looks very attractive. So it seems that AMD is indeed able to steal some market share from Intel. Intel, the company, is pretty much cooked. I already discussed in a few videos. I think I'm going to go through the latest updates soon on Intel, but the company looks really bad. It's a value trap. One of the reasons why, valuation ratios, who the heck looks like them? If the company doesn't have a strong narrative, even after Trump's 10% stake, which is a very strange industrial policy, and not too many people are happy with that, by the way. I don't know. Anyways, moving on. What I want to focus here is on the data center segment, 3.2 billion. Okay, that's peanuts compared to Nvidia, but anyways, it's fine. And the revenue growth is 14% year over year. Let me go and have a closer look at what that segment is doing in terms of growth. Here it is. And I'm going to look at the quarterly time frame. What? Okay, I didn't expect this. Damn. That looks awful. Okay, I believe China sales. I don't know if the MI308 was that important. Let me just have a very quick look to see what is the impact of the GPU, the MI308, not being able to be shipped to Chinese customers. So let me see what is the impact. It says U.S. export restrictions effectively eliminated. Yeah. There is an 800 million inventory and related charges still tied to export controls. GAAP gross margins 43%, which is a decline of 10 points year over year. Non-GAAP gross margins will have been 54%. Okay, not bad. Nvidia's are better. Data center revenue fell 12% sequentially due to MI308 export controls. All right, this is the reason. Data center posted a 155 million operating loss versus 743 million profit a year ago. The loss was primarily due to charges. Okay, that makes sense. You have inventory, which is written down, and that would be an expense. Third quarter outlook excludes MI308 revenue. Okay, we already know that. So their outlook doesn't take into account sales to China. Very similarly to what happens with Nvidia. They don't take into account sales of the H20s. In fact, the company is talking about the Blackwell B30A. And in September, heck, this month, they're going to send some samples for testing. So some Chinese customers are going to receive a few GPUs, and let's see what happens. And in the meantime, of course, the company is negotiating with the US government on licenses for these downgraded chips. I think that the B30A had half of the performance of a B300, and that was a lot, So, anyways, I like to see if AMD has an upgraded chip similar to the B30A for China, because the MI308 is going to be absolutely obsolete. Right, so I can only see 800 million inventory charges. All right, let's do let me show you how I use AI. This is key, If you're researching using Google, you're just wasting time. I want to know the impacts on AMD's top line due to the pause of exports to China. I want to know what is the actual value that compressed the top line in Q2. I don't think there's going to be any information on this, and I don't think I wrote or I dictated this correctly. Well, yeah, let's see. This is going to take a few minutes. So let's move on. I'm not really happy, I have to say, about this decline. This looks awful. What the hell? You had 57% year-over-year growth in the data center segment, and now you have 14%. What? That's a big decline, huh? That is a really big decline. Is this correct? It's gotta be correct, yeah. Well, that's crazy, huh? Wow. And yet the stock was up. I remember after earnings, that was there in early August. Well, it was down 6%. I don't know. I don't like the fact that the growth in data center is going down significantly. This is a sequential decline. We're talking about how much? 30, 40 percentage points decline sequentially from 57 to 14. What? There's got to be something here, huh? Let's see what happens. All right. Short answer, about 700 million. AMD said Q2 2025 guidance removed roughly 700 million of revenue because of the MI308 shipments to China. All right, 700 million. That's the top line compression that I'm asking for. For context, AMD reported 7.69 in Q2. Absent the pause, a simple add back implies, okay, revenue 8.3, 8.4, more or less. The company booked 800 million of inventory and related charges tied to the China curbs. All right, let's do a quick math. 700 million, right? So that's how much is the impact. If I go to the fundamentals and I look at this segment right here, so let's add up how much will the revenue be, including those 700 million. So 240, we add 700. Okay. And now I want to compare that to the same quarter last year. So that was 2834. 39%. Okay, so the growth, if you were to include those 700 million, the growth in the data center segment in Q2, it would have been about 40%. That's significantly better than 14.3. Let me tell you, significantly better. Wow, that's a big decline. I mean, the reason I say a big decline, just take a look at Nvidia. I mean, I know it's a different company. I know it's a different story, but still, the impact on their top line was minimal compared to AMD. So if you have a look at the data center revenue, all right, in the past quarter, yeah, so the decline from 73 to 56, whilst it's important, it's not as dramatic as for AMD. As you can see, you know, the slope of this decline is pretty much the same as from January to April. So this was expected due to the law of large numbers. You know, the higher the revenue, the more difficult it is to grow. But I have to say that I'm very disappointed by the fact that, you know, AMD relies so much on China. And in fact, if we go through the fundamentals, let's have a look at their exposure in China. I don't think they report that on a quarterly basis. They don't. So let's have a look at annual. And here we could see the revenue they generate in China. There you go. China. In 2024, it was 6.23 billion. Wow. And if we look at the common size, so China, there it is, 24%. That's a lot. So a quarter of the company's revenue is coming from China. That's a lot. And I believe that a big amount of that revenue is for data center segment. That's not very that's not very comforting. Well, they're gonna get back the shipments. That's for sure. They're going to resume the shipments. I'm gonna go through in details in a moment. I don't like that. Huh? That's a very high reliance on China. And if China prefers the B30A, so Nvidia's B30A GPU, I think AMD is cooked, because if they only have the MI308, that's not good, huh? Let's see again. Nvidia is developing a new GPU for China, which is the B30A. I want to know whether AMD has any plans to develop a similar GPU, something that's more powerful than the MI308. This is key, because if there aren't any reports online that are talking about this, I don't know. I'm gonna start to sweat. Let's continue. All right, upside. Let's be positive. The upside. Yeah, let's stay positive. We've got Turin ramp. Okay, 100 new cloud instances in the second quarter. Not bad. 1,200 Epic instances globally. 28 new Turin platforms from HPE, Dell, Lenovo, and Supermicro. All right, these are all the data center infrastructure companies. So these guys, they build racks, and of course they're going to be using the CPUs in their build out. Very interesting. So wins across telecom, all right, and HPC. They have over 1/3 of top 500 customers, 12 of the top 20 green 500. What the heck is that? The green is a biannual ranking of supercomputers. What the hell is that? Top 500 list of supercomputers in terms of energy efficiency. Just the bollocks. Even though energy efficiency is important for computing because, you know, the less power you use, the more margins you have. You know, the math is very simple. I think Chris, that was the CFO of Nvidia. I noticed that in the previous video. She said that an investment in a GB300, which was in the order of magnitude of 3 million, it will yield you 30 million in token value. That said, that's only the top line. But how much is the bottom line of that investment? Because you have to pay electricity, you got to pay for depreciation. I don't know how you will quantify that, but you have to pay for that as well. And I don't know, you have to pay for more things that are not just, a guy in a basement has one GB300 running and he's making 30 million. No, it's way more complex than that. Anyways, let's continue. So we got CPU. Let's see if I get the, I have it. Let's see if AMD has anything more than the MI308. So the short answer, AMD is cooked. No public sign that AMD has a B30A style China-only GPU that's stronger than the MI308. Oh. Okay, I'm definitely not buying the dip. I'm not saying that shares won't go up. They will go up because this is a high beta stock. But this is not very... Yeah, I think my case is done. And that's it. That's my thesis on AMD. Wow, they don't have a B30A style GPU and a quarter of its revenue comes from China. Are you freaking kidding me? The company relies on China more than twice as much as Nvidia. Nvidia, I think the revenue contribution from China was like 9% or 9.7% in the last in 2024. Wow. And yeah, and you can see that. I mean, we already did the math, yeah? So we already did the math when we went to percent change, data center revenue, and you can see the massive decline. Yeah, so that downfall, yeah, is mainly because of 700 million in revenue that, it's sitting there in inventories. So, yeah, I'm not sure how AMD is going to compete against the B30. I really don't know. Let's see if I am not the only one concerned about this. AMD, let's see what the analysts are thinking. Let's look at earnings. Let's go to estimates. Let's go to the quarterly revisions. And here I want to see the top line. So the street is expecting revenue. Oh, look at that. Very interesting. Revenue is expected to normalize in the, let's call it low 20s, even though, we're talking about 19%, 18%. Okay, that's low 20s. Up until, Q1 2026. And then they expect a jump in revenue, possibly due to MI400. We're going to see a little bit more in more details that GPU. I'm quite curious about the latest updates, specifically on when it's going to be released. And damn. So fiscal Q3 is expected to be a very good quarter. Yeah, the MI350 and the 350X. I think that's the reason why the company is going to have a blockbuster. Well, a blockbuster, yeah. I mean, the strongest quarter. Look at this. Take this into account. Yeah, the strongest growth the company is ever gonna see for the next 4 years is going to be in Q3 this year. From here, everything is downhill in terms of growth. So 27%, then you have 19, then you have 24, then you have, low 20s, and then you have, low 20s as well. So, it's a very good growth, don't get me wrong. And you're talking about growing 9 billion, which is not easy. But when you compare that to Nvidia, things are quite raw, because Nvidia, if you look at the quarterly consensus, their growth is, this is AMD. Earnings estimates quarterly. Look at that growth. Are you freaking kidding me? Just look at that, I think the case between Nvidia and AMD is quite simple. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to see which company is better positioned. Just look at this growth. Are you kidding me? Mid 50s until the end of the year. Next year, we're going to have mid to low 40s. I don't know what the hell is going on then, because I think in the second half of next year, Rubin, it should be available in mass production. So I already said that in my previous video on Nvidia, why analysts think that Rubin is not going to further support the ridiculous growth that we're seeing today. So that's October 26th. It's almost a year from now. So I'm not that worried. A year from now, Nvidia can be in the 250s by then, when this issue happens. But it's something to consider. Back to AMD, I don't like the growth, I have to say. When you compare it to Nvidia, I don't like it. And I don't like the fact that the company doesn't have a B30A style chip. Nothing. AMD hasn't announced a tougher than MI308 China GPU. Hopefully they will soon. Okay, so that I think is going to be a catalyst, a positive catalyst for the stock. I don't like that. All right. Is there any sense in continuing through the upside analysis? Because I don't know. It's gonna go up. Don't get me wrong. It's a high beta stock. If the semiconductor industry goes up because everybody's buying these GPUs, AMD is gonna go up. But there is more risk on AMD than Nvidia. This is my point, because your capital is limited, mine is limited, so I need to be very careful on where I allocate and how I manage the risk. And I think the downside risk for Nvidia is less than AMD, considering that Nvidia relies less on China, and Nvidia is already looking for the B30As, and AMD is not. So, sorry for being repetitive, but I find it crazy that the company is not, tripling down, not doubling down, tripling down on China. 24% of revenue coming from China. You're joking. Anyways, CPU demand. We have agentic AI, of course, increases CPU-intensive tasks per token. Cloud capex includes significant CPU capex. That makes sense. All right, no numbers here. Broader workloads and rising enterprise adoption underpin server momentum. Yes, server momentum in the second half of this year, possibly 2026 as well. So yeah, and you can see it in the consensus. Q3 is going to be mid to high 20s and then low 20s in Q4. So AMD from here until December, AMD could be a very good buy. Don't get me wrong. This is a very good buy, and I think it's going to retest all-time highs. Don't get me wrong. But I think looking ahead, looking for next year, people are going to be like, okay, does it make sense to have this stock, which possibly is not? I don't want to double down on the China topic, but I don't know. I'm just surprised that the company is not doing anything there. All right, MI350. This is the revenue growth driver. Volume production began ahead of schedule in June. Great. Steep H2 ramp planned. MI355 matches and exceeds the B200. Interesting. but not the B300. Comparable to GB200, okay, that's, I believe, when using the Epic 5 CPU, most likely. Because, the GB, this is the combination of a GPU and a CPU. Yeah, so the MI355, I believe, is just the GPU. Let's find out. Let's clear doubts, So you're watching how I do analysis, and yeah. I want to know in details whether AMD's MI355 is a GPU or an AI accelerator. I want to know whether that MI355 includes also a CPU. Right, so I want to clarify this because, I'm not an expert in the semiconductor industry. I'm not an expert on anything, to be honest, even though, I have this degree in aeronautical engineering, which, I'm using to, warm up in the winter. I have a very nice fire outside, so under the bridge. Anyways, let's keep on. So GB200, all right, up to 40% more tokens per dollar. That's good, but the company failed to compare the MI355 to the GB300, to the Ultra. And the Ultra is the one that Nvidia has right now. You cannot compare your leading AI accelerator with Nvidia's second best. You have to compare it to the first one. Short answer. It's a GPU class AI accelerator, and it doesn't include a CPU. Okay, perfect. So it's a simple GPU, right? It's part of the Instinct family. In data centers, this kind of GPU is commonly called an AI accelerator. Yes, exactly. But it's architecturally GPU built on AMD's CDNA 4 architecture. Perfect. I think, I always mix up AI accelerator and superchip. Superchip is the one that has the GPU and a CPU. Let's double check. Is it true that superchip, an AI superchip, is a combination of a GPU and a CPU? How do you call that? What are the common names to call the rack scale GPU plus CPU plus HBM memory? Because, people call it racks, servers, but I want to know what are the different names, because there are a lot of terms and I just get confused. Moving on. Oracle building 27,000 node MI355X cluster. Instinct revenue expected up year over year in the third quarter, and they don't assume anything from China. That makes sense. Faster than expected MI355 customer adoption, which is good. It's a sign that there is a lot of demand for AI, and that's what people like me want to hear. I believe this is, of course, coming from the hyperscalers. MI355 ramps quickly given similarity to MI300 infrastructure. Okay, I'm looking for numbers, ROCM 7 announced. That's a competitor, I believe, for CUDA. I'm not going to go into details on this one. But it's pretty much NVIDIA's moat is the CUDA software. And AMD runs on ROC, on the ROC architecture. So 3x higher inference training versus the previous generation. Okay, that's good. That's a very good performance. Nightly builds. First AMD developer cloud with pre-configured containers. Okay. Sovereign AI, over 40 active globally. Okay, we've seen the same for Nvidia. China export license progress for the MI308. Okay, so US Department of Commerce moving forward on MI308 export licenses reviews. Expect to resume MI308 shipments upon approvals. Q3 guide excludes MI308 revenue. Okay. Shall we look at the guidance? Let's go through the presentation. And what is the guidance for Q3? Sorry if I go very quickly. I need to see the guidance. There we go. Financial outlook. We have 8.7 billion. And of course, there's a margin of error, which is small, 300 million up and down. Let's see how much is that when we look at the fundamentals. Damn, how much was it? 8.7. Let's go back to the income statement, right? Last 12 months. No, back to quarterly. Okay, 8.7, and we had in September 24, we had 6.8. 28% year-over-year growth projected for Q3. It's not bad, it's not bad, but yeah, it's pretty much what the street was expecting, 28% more or less. So the street thinks that management is going to be accurate at the midpoint of this revenue range. I don't know. It's not that they won't reach this, they will. It's simply that they rely too much on China. Operating expenses, all right. Anything interesting here? Not much. Gross margin, 54%. Let's see what happens with margin. So I'll go into details in a moment. So majority of inventory is work in progress for the 308, a couple of quarters to run through post-approval. All right, let's see what we have else. Forward AI roadmap and Helios rack scale systems. This is the one, the MI400, targeted for next year. Any details? Let's see, because I think I had the prompt for the next. There we go. The next GPUs that the company has in the timeline. So the Instinct MI400 series. This model is so AMD previewed the MI400 for 2026. Yeah, but when? I mean, 2026. Give me a half one, half two. I think this is going to be possibly half true, maybe Q4, because they didn't commit on a particular quarter or half semester. All right, with the Helios double wide rack design, present analysts consistently cite 2026 availability. Helios couples. Okay, so this is a rack scale. This is what I was mentioning earlier. That's a combination of a GPU, which is the MI400, an EPIC CPU, which is the Venice in this case, and then we have the next generation Volcano NIC. So that I think is similar. It's something for networking because they don't make memory chips. So that's got to be similar to Nvidia's InfiniBand or the Ethernet switches. Targeting rack level leadership. Okay, next gen EPIC. What I'm seeing for AMD is that they are one generation behind Nvidia. I think the MI400 is going to be slightly better than the GB300. The only problem is that by the time they release the MI400, Nvidia is working on the Rubin, on the Vera Rubin. And if you have a Vera Rubin, I don't know. I don't think the MI400 is going to compete with the Vera Rubin. So that's another problem that I see here. Yeah. And that's the next generation, but there is nothing after that. Mid-late. AMD previewed for, okay, but yeah, it doesn't say when in 2026. If you're planning AI training, okay, target the current family, which is the MI350X. All right, for 2026 deployments, plan that with Helios, okay, but they don't tell you when. So that's quite disappointing, they don't tell you when in 2026. 40 petaflops, FP4, whatever that means, 50% memory bandwidth throughout, throughput versus competition. Helios rack links up to 72 GPUs. This is like Nvidia's NVL72. This is nothing new. You know, that's what I'm saying, you know. AMD is a family behind. You know, the Helios rack links, they're going to have 72 GPUs. So NVIDIA's current generation, the Blackwell Ultra, also known as GB300, in the in the rack scale configuration, it has 72 GPUs through the NVL72 configuration. So it has 72 GPUs and 36 CPUs, the Grace CPUs. 10x generational performance for advanced models. That makes sense. But yeah, system level capability, ZT Systems acquisition. Okay, they integrated that, which is good. Let's see what are margins doing because of the integration. If we look at ratios, and inside ratios, we look at margins. I want to see margins, gross profit margin. Okay, let's exclude the last quarter because you had the write-downs from the situation in China. It's not bad. I mean, so far I don't see a major headwind from the integration of ZT Systems. That was a massive acquisition. I think it was like over 30 billion, I think, ZT Systems. AMD acquisition. Only 4.9 billion. I thought it was more. Okay, maybe I'm mixing things up. 4.9 billion. Yeah, I think I'm mixing things with Broadcom's acquisition of VMware. Let me just clear it out. Broadcom VMware acquisition, and that one was 69 billion. Yeah, this was the one, the big one. By the way, this is one of the reasons why Broadcom is, well, it's not one of the reasons because this is in its infrastructure segment, and Broadcom is very good in its AI semiconductor segment. So, well, not all the growth is driven by this acquisition. Anyways, back to AMD. The decline makes sense, 43% gross margin. Well, I think management said that it was here. GAAP, yes, non-GAAP gross margin, if you don't take into account the 10 percentage points headwind due to the inventory and related charges, 800 million, by the way, that's how much they wrote down in inventories, 54%, which is more or less aligned with this trend. Yeah, good, very good. The ZT acquisition is not diluting margins. Very good. Yeah. Perfect. Sanmina to acquire ZT's US manufacturing. Okay. Becomes a lead partner for AI rack manufacturing. This is key. And I think this is related to Helios. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Because that Helios is an AI rack. And I think this, yeah, they subcontracted by selling them the division, so they are the experts and they don't want to have. I think AMD doesn't want to do the rack manufacturing because they have no experience there. Client, PC strength and richer mix. Client, okay, let's see. First, how important is client for AMD? Let's go back to segments and KPIs. Common size, client revenue, 32%. That's a lot. Wow. Are you kidding me? 32% of revenue comes from clients? And so these are CPUs for general, PCs, either for consumers or businesses, but these are CPUs for PCs. Then you have gaming, 15%. And then you have, this is embedded revenue. That's for IoT devices, I think. Wow. client revenue. So the client and gaming revenue is 47%. So the biggest contributor to revenue is not the data center segment. Why am I so angry about this? Check this out. Oh man, AMD doesn't look good, huh? I don't like it. Look at Nvidia. Check this out. You go to financials. Let's look at segments and KPIs. And if you look at the common size in its segments, freaking data center revenue accounts for 89% of the overall revenue in the last 12 months. 89% from data centers. AMD, yeah, the revenue is 42%. I don't like that. It's not enough. I mean, maybe that's why they're not growing as much as Nvidia, is because they're still dragged down. I mean, when I say dragged down, don't get me wrong, I think that the client segment is growing quite well. So total client and gaming was up by freaking 69%. Very good. Huh? No, they're not being dragged down by this segment. No, sorry. It's nothing related to that. What I wanted to say is that, yeah, the data center segment doesn't have enough growth because they rely on China. And that's depressing their top line. Yeah, gaming momentum. The company, wow, 73% increase in the gaming segment. That's crazy. New multi-year custom chip collaboration for the next generation Xbox. I was thinking to buy the Xbox Series X. I don't have the time, and I think that's going to be, I don't know. So they're going to release a new one. That's a good excuse for me to not buy and just wait until the next one. Deeper Sony collaboration. Wow, for PlayStation maybe? Project. I'm very curious. What's that? Sony. The PlayStation 6 is likely going to benefit console gamers for the next generation consoles with PlayStation 6. Go figure what it is. Okay, it's too early because the PS5 was released, when was that? In 2021 or 2020? I don't remember. I think it takes 10 years between cycles for these consoles. All right, strong Radeon 9000 demand, 2x prior gen ray tracking. Okay, gaming revenues up. I like that. Next, embedded. For embedded, you don't have enough revenue, so I'm not going to look at this. Financial strength this is the Q3 guidance. So 32% year-over-year growth in this case. Yeah, we've seen that. Q2 revenue, this was the last quarter. The next quarter implies a 28% year-over-year gain, 30% up sequentially. And it doesn't take into account the sales in China, which I think they were estimated at 700 million. 478 million Q2 buybacks. That's a lot of buybacks. 6 billion added authorization. Oh, right. They have a 6 billion additional buyback plan. And that goes on top of the 9.5 remaining. Not bad. Nvidia, I'm comparing Nvidia with AMD because you cannot exclude such a comparison. 60 billion is how much Nvidia authorized in the past quarter. 60, that's 10x AMD. 9.5 billion remaining, cash 5.9 billion, long-term debt 3.2. Yeah, I'm not worried about debt. All right, Ryzen and Epic performance driving margin. 1 billion free cash flow in the second quarter. That's good. X-Charge gross margin will have been 54%. Okay, and the last point is the MI400 and the Helios rack scale system. Lead times 8 to 9 months. Okay. Co-development underway with large customers to ensure the Helios rack compatibility for 2026 deployments. One second, what's that lead time? Are they targeting the MI400 by mid-26? Supply chain prepared for... right. So the lead time is to get the supply chain ready for the MI350 and MI400. Okay, I need to know more. Let's copy this and let's go to the earnings call. Bam. So the question was, let's see. I wanted to ask you about lead times. Oh, that's exactly what I want to know. On the Instinct family, both for the MI350 family and MI400. As you move into larger clusters, which it sounds like you're doing at least with Oracle on 350, and then endeavor to do more on 400, okay, so that's the MI400, how much visibility and lead time do you need from your customers? Okay, because I would imagine the lead time for your parts is measured in months, but on the infrastructure side, in particular for the larger scale deployments, I mean, those things are measured in years at this point. So maybe you could speak about the visibility on the 400. Lead time are long, given the processing steps that we have to go through. Think about it somewhere between 8 to 9 months lead time. I think that's between, damn, I know what it is. What it is. The lead time is the time between an order and when the company receives the order. Right. So maybe they're 9 months away from the MI400, from the first MI400. That would be, that would be almost mid-2026. Mid-Q2 2026. Wow, that's good. Think about it. Okay, we have a very, very strong supply chain. Yes, we have been preparing these RAMs for both of them. Anything interesting on the timeline? Let's see, out of details. Helios Rack is fully compatible with our central build as we go into 2026. Yeah, but which half? So that visibility is important. I think that co-development, co-engineering is important as we go into a rack scale architecture, and then the ZT team on the manufacturing side, they have been extremely helpful in terms of both internal platform build out as well as ensuring that we're working closely with customers and data center needs. Okay, no reply. And here they're talking about, if they add back the charges, the gross margins will have been around 54%. And unfortunately, the company doesn't guide gross margins by, on a quarter beyond the next quarter. Nvidia guides margins mid-70s before year end. AMD didn't guide anything above the third quarter. Okay, that's fine. And in regards to the downside, we've already seen some of the things. I already mentioned that. So client and gaming seasonality headwinds, Q4 console decline. Let me see this again. So client expected to grow in Q3, okay, but a little bit less than seasonal due to uncertainties. Gaming expected flattish in Q3 versus strong Q2. Q4 console business expected to be down strong double digits. Driving the combined client and gaming segment, but probably down in Q4. I believe they don't have any consoles to sell in gaming. Okay, that's definitely interesting there. So, and thinking gaming is a big segment for the company. If you look at gaming again, segments and KPIs, gaming was 10% in the last 12 months, and client and gaming is 40%. So I think it's important. I think it's relevant for the company to know what's going on in client and gaming. Client, but it'll be less than seasonal. Gaming expected to be flattish. Q4 console business expected to be down. And I think the console business is related to Xbox mainly. Or maybe the PS5 as well, because I think there was a new version of PS5 last year that wasn't a real success. Anyways, I'll look into client and gaming in another video, because I want to go into details on what's going on there. Embedded revenue, 824 million, down 4%, flat. Demand remains mixed, pockets of softness and inventory reduction. Embedded operating income, 33% margin. Okay, not bad. Versus 40% a year ago. Ooh, that's bad. So margins are going down. The decline is due to the product mix. Okay, another segment that I have to go to dive deep into details. It's not very important for the company. You know, when you look at common size, how much is the embedded? 11%. It's significant. It's actually more than gaming. So, yeah, something worth diving deep into in our video. Gross margin headwinds from mix in gaming and MI margins below corporate average. MI Instinct product gross margins are a little bit below corporate average. Oh. Mix headwind noted, gaming business quite high, making mix. Interesting. So the margins on the MI Instinct are below the corporate average. Below 54%. You're joking. It's got to be related to the ramp, because when you ramp a product, you know, it's difficult to have high margins when you're new to that. All right. Something to look at. I want to see. I think this was discussed in the Q&A. Definitely in the Q&A. This cannot be a prepared remark. Definitely a Q&A. Yeah. Gross margin for our MI products was a little bit below corporate average. Our priority is to really address the larger, faster growing revenue opportunities as we have and provide customers a better TCO to really expand our presence in the marketplace. I think the way to think about our gross margin, there are different dynamics, different customers, different generations, but also our operation team has been continuing really to drive operational efficiency for the MI family's gross margin. Okay, how? Our operation team has been continuing to drive operational efficiency. How? The usual bullshit, man. I don't like this. That has been ongoing, so it's not necessarily tied to the revenue level each quarter. But you should think about is a trend in the longer term. It should improve continually going forward. Okay. So these margins on the MI family should improve. How? Go figure. Operational efficiency. Unless they replace workers with robots, humanoids, I don't see this going forward. I don't know. Overall, the way I think about these gross margin dollars, right, is one of the fastest growing market opportunities for any financial metrics. Gross margin dollars is what we try to grab. Hopefully that helped your question. Okay. No, it didn't, but anyways. All right. Overall, my conclusion, I'm not going to go through a presentation because we already seen some of this stuff. You know, I'm not going to go through the slides. All right. Back to the charts. What I see here is potentially a support. All right. So we've got this right there. Seems to be, resistance. This seems to be a support back in July 25. And now the share price is testing this level again. I think it's going to consolidate around. Maybe it's going to go up again after they receive the, it's not that they receive the license because they already have the license to export to China, but the 15% deal with the US government is not on paper. So that's what they're waiting for. All right. I think once they get that, the stock is going to be able to run up because a quarter of the revenue comes from China. That said, they don't have an equivalent for the B30A, so I'm not really bullish on. I mean, I am bullish on AMD. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not ultra bullish like in the case of Nvidia. So are they going to be able to hit all-time highs again in the 200s? Maybe. I don't see that far-fetched, especially before the end of the year. But after that, Q1 growth is going to be quite slow. Q2 is going to be quite good, 25%. Don't get me wrong. That's the second best until the end of the decade. So not bad. I wonder why. It's gotta be related to the gaming segment. So I'm gonna have a look at that segment in our video. Anyways, that's it for today. There is a lot of information. This is not an easy stock to analyze. They have a lot of things going on. And I hope that you learned something. I hope that you learned how to analyze stocks in the same way that I do. And yeah, if you have any thoughts, let me know in the comment section. I can be wrong with anything that I said. So let me know where my thesis is inaccurate or where you disagree with it. Good. Right. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.